Welcome back. If you have only recently discovered 360 Speedway, and particularly if you enjoy the 360 Speedway output, you may be super impressed, you may be super interested to know that we have our dedicated 360 Speedway YouTube channel, where we now have approximately 90 plus individual videos, some long form, some are only short form for 20 or 30 seconds, but in total 90 minutes of Speedway chat, 90 videos of Speedway chat, which encompasses something like 15 or 16 hours worth of Speedway discussion involving Nigel, Stuart Robson, Stuart McDonald, Ronnie Corey, Carl Johnson, Simon Lambert, Ulrich Oostergaard, to name but at least 6 of them. And hopefully you can, if you go into the YouTube channel, search it out on YouTube, 360 Speedway, you will see the whole library, and just pick and choose, even randomly, what you might be interested to watch. Sit back with a drink and drink it all in. And also, we have we're on Spotify, so again, if you like to listen as opposed to watch your podcast, then search us out on Spotify under 360 Speedway. Let's press on with Fans Pulse Lap 2. Now, this is a topic that was initiated by a good friend of 360 Speedway, Simon from Mildenhall. And Simon from Mildenhall is currently top of the league in terms of submitting voice note messages to our dedicated WhatsApp channel. So thank you, Simon. Simon's been back in touch with another WhatsApp message, and that's what's engendered this particular conversation. We'll play Simon's message in just a moment, but a number of episodes back we touched on track prep and just how conducive the skill and the focus on good track preparation is to Speedway. We cited Andy Meredith and the track crew at Bellevue when we were talking about the back-to-back Grand Prix and their work and their hard graft. Obviously played a major role in staging a very successful pair of Grand Prix events in Manchester. Simon is thinking ahead to 2026 and some of the planning, some of the big decisions that need to be made. But Simon's a little bit concerned about the prospect of track prep and trying to improve that situation. So without further ado, let's listen to Simon's message now.
I've been reading a lot of comments about potential restructuring for season 2026. We do have some clubs who seem to be able to produce a good standard of race surface for the riders week on week. However, sadly, we have some clubs that are failing to do this. And going on Dan Bewley's comments at Leicester, if we're not giving these guys, good racetracks to work with, they're not going to put themselves out, and therefore then the fans are not seeing good racing and people stop going. So why is it that we have clubs like Glasgow, Bellevue, Workington? Granted, appreciate that those tracks are perfectly built for Speedway and clubs have to work within certain parameters. However, those clubs and a few others are producing consistently good race surfaces every week. Conversely, sadly, at the moment, there are clubs that are not producing good race surfaces on a weekly basis. How can this be acceptable? Why is this not being monitored?
So there we are. Thank you once again, Simon, for taking time and trouble to submit a voice note. You're still top of that particular league. So James, as you'll have heard firsthand from Simon, he's citing some concern that already this season, some tracks are reputed for having consistently good track prep, and that lends itself to better racing because the riders enjoy the benefits and the confidence to do what they do best. On some other circuits, and Simon mentioned something that I hadn't picked up on, but Simon mentioned that Dan Bewley may have made some comments after a recent trip to Leicester. But to Simon's point, there's no point in restructuring, reconfiguring British Speedway for the greater good next season if we don't also pay attention to trying to make sure that the product can be the best as it can on the basis of good and consistent track prep. Probably a no-brainer. Stuart McDonald.
Absolutely, Derek. I mean, Simon's got a great point there. Some of the racetracks I think that we used to race in years ago. I mean, I think Nigel will remember back in the day when you used to come to Glasgow, and you had likes of Jimmy Beaton doing the track. There was always a pile of dirt dumped in the middle of the first or second bend. The track was always like a ploughed field, and that was to suit mostly the home riders. I know that Dan's made a comment on obviously the Leicester circuit. Again, you look at some of the riding nowadays and how fast it is. The tracks need to be consistent. Absolutely. Most tracks nowadays, all you need to do is look at what Bellevue we spoke about. I think a lot of the other tracks, Glasgow is another one. I know the track preparation is second to none with these guys. You've got Andy Meredith looking after, I think, both circuits. But without a fair racetrack, you can't see the ability in riders. They can't ride 100%, and it's definitely something that would need to be consistent all over the leagues.
Stuart Robson, riders will tend to complain about tracks periodically, hopefully not consistently, but even their home circuit could be, in the riders' views, a bit inconsistent from week to week. But in fairness to the riders, right, and you've been one for a long time, that is your right, that is your gift to voice any concerns that you might have about the track prep or something in relation to your prospective safety.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, Simon has got a good point there. And tracks should be sort of monitored, and they should have to meet certain standards, really. And it's an art doing tracks. It's an art, and you've got to be good at it. And Andy Meredith is one of the good ones. There's a handful of others. Johnny Swales was always very, very good. Doc Bridget, amongst others. There are others. I'm just to name but a few there. And I can relate to Johnny with Newcastle, because if we ever had an issue with the track there as home riders, we would go and speak to him during the meeting, and we would then then be agreed, and he would get out there and he would address that issue we had, whatever it might be. If it was too slick, we'd say, can you try and get a bit of dirt on the outside, or wherever it might be, on the start, or it's too grippy, can you try and flatten that bit off a bit, just tire pack it in, whatever it might be. And he was one of the people that could do it. He could address the situation and get on and okay, wouldn't get it perfect every time, because you can't in such short time, but he would address it and it would make it better. But yeah, definitely it needs looking at, really, because there's a handful of tracks. Again, Bellevue, you've got to go back to that. Glasgow, like Stu just said, brilliant. Kings Lynn was always very consistent. I always enjoyed riding there. There are others, but then there were other tracks back in the day, like Newport. It was full of holes and bumps and soft spots, and I mean, personally, I liked it. I didn't mind it because other riders didn't like it, and I could get around it. And there was a bit of a knack to riding that place, and basically you rode around the outside of all the bumps and holes, and that was the way to do it. I remember watching Craig Watson there, because he was an expert around there, and I cottoned on to what he did, and basically followed his lead. Other tracks, Scunthorpe isn't what it used to be. When that place first opened, it was such a good track. It was great. It's a great shape, and it's really good. It used to produce some really good racing, but because they run the stock cars and stuff there, which understandably they need to bring the income, I feel that I haven't been there in a few years. It might be different now, but when I was there, the camber was there was sort of 2/3 of the way out on the corners, more so the third and fourth, and you could get sucked into the bottom of the fence if you weren't careful. And coming off the fourth bend there as well, if you went too wide, it would drag you into the fence going down the straight, which that's dangerous. You've got such a good opportunity with a track there, and you can't use the whole track because of the way the camber is. And it can cause issues, and it could cause accidents. So, yeah, I mean, like I say, it might be different now. It's just how I remember it the last time I rode there. But yeah, definitely something that should be looked at.
We'll need to ask Simon Lambert about that next time he pops up. Nigel, to Simon from Mildenhall's original point, he's a little bit concerned that there'll be so much focus on getting the format and the league structure right next season that Speedway potentially could take its eye off the ball in terms of managing and monitoring and improving and making consistent track prep around the country. And that's got to be a critical factor to the ultimate entertainment factor in Speedway, Nigel.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's happened over the years, obviously the lay down have come down. And let's not forget, and I do think there's a bit of fallacy here. People keep saying, you keep reading, and it's people that don't know what they're on about at times, I'm sure, never rode a bike, keep saying they want more dirt on the track. Well, there needs to be more dirt. You ask the lads that ride these lay downs, they'll tell you. I was talking to Graham Jones, you know Graham Jones from anywhere at Glasgow, who does engines and that. And Graham was saying pretty much that you get too much dirt on the track nowadays with these laydowns, and they'll just take off and they'll go like a rocket then. But which way they'll go is anybody's guess. I don't think it's so much about the dirt on the track. Certainly preparation, yes, that's got to be right. Correct watering, certain amount of dirt on the track. But also, I think the bikes have changed drastically, haven't they? They're revving at twice what they used to be at some of these tracks. Apart from your Bellevue, your Redcar, your Scunthorpe, your Workington, which are all new tracks. And funnily enough, they all produce good racing, don't they? All new tracks. The older tracks, your more technical ones, your Ipswiches, I know Leicester's a new track. Birmingham, that's again a tight one right inside of a dog track. Maybe they don't lend themselves to the laydowns, like Bellevue, Redcar, the tracks I just mentioned, Workington. Plus, they are prepared right as well, those tracks, which obviously, but there's never great loads of dirt on at Bellevue. There's a nice amount of dirt on, but also, I don't know, Sheffield's another one. I heard him saying the other night, and you could see it, dirt thrown up against the fence. Well, it will be, won't it? Because the bikes are revving that high. Sheffield is quite narrow, so the dirt at Bellevue, for example, the dirt has got twice as far to go as at Sheffield, because it's probably twice as wide. Yeah. So, the higher the engine's rev, the further they will throw the dirt. And I think that's really what's happened over the years. And some of the older tracks, what we've been going for years, were okay for the low revving engines, but now with these laydowns, it seems to be a struggle to get them just right.
Yeah, that's a good observation, actually, Nigel. When you think about it, yeah, you could probably sort tracks into newer versus older, and make that sort of assertion. Incidentally, just going back to to Simon's point that Dan had a bit of a complaint, a bit of a grumble about Leicester. I'm quite sure Max Frick didn't have any complaints about Leicester that night. So again, was it down to Dan's performance that night that was behind the comment? But anyway, listen, I've done a little bit unusual for me. I've done a little bit of digging around, a little bit of research on this, and Simon and hopefully everyone else listening might just learn something new from what I'm about to say. And if you knew all this already, then you were more knowledgeable than I was. So in terms of the sort of training and monitoring of tracks throughout the year. So what I've understood today is something that we probably all knew anyway. So the SCB referee on every meeting will submit a report, and the SCB referees, of course, there's a different referee at each track every week. They do the circuit. The referee will complete a report on track conditions and safety features, so the kickboard, the fence, the track prep, the track surface, etc. And in that report, the SCB referee can note anything of concern that isn't up to scratch, isn't up to standard, that might be of concern, and that has to be rectified ideally by the next home meeting. And the next on-duty referee will be aware, they'll be very aware of any previously reported imperfections, and they will know to re-examine that. And if there are any ongoing issues that are never resolved, then that's obviously brought to the attention of the promoters of that particular track. over and above that, what I understand is that all track curators in the UK do attend, I think it's mandatory, every 2 or 3 seasons I think they attend a dedicated, I'm going to call it a training course. So it's a very structured presentation and discussion on all things related to track prep. It covers things like the use of items of equipment and different techniques that they can deploy, how to cope with different conditions that they find, wet conditions, dry conditions, etc. And although there will be variations from club to club in terms of what equipment the track staff have at their disposal, there is a minimum requirement of, I understand, 2 tractors, a blade, a water bowser and a grader. So all tracks as a minimum must have that set of equipment. And if the tracks themselves report any issues that they're not able to resolve, or if the referees continually are pulling up a particular circuit on a particular issue, then the SCB track advisor, Andy Meredith, and Andy's colleague, whose name immediately escapes me, I apologise. Those guys are called in, and they'll make a visit to that track, and they'll work with the resident track curator to resolve it. So the reason that I describe all of that is just to emphasise, just to share that there is a bit of a process, an ongoing process to try and monitor and try and improve and lift standards. And I don't know whether that is or isn't apparent from track to track. I dare say it's never going to eradicate all issues all of the time, but Stuart McDonald, to bring you back in on that, was that something you were aware of, Stuart, or are you reasonably pleased to hear that something like that is in existence?
Do you know, when we were talking earlier on, Derek, I was going to say something along the lines of Andy Meredith, have him going round and scoring all the tracks. But listen, that's great news, and I think Simon will be delighted with that as well, because it's a really, really good point. It's a strong point that obviously everybody needs to listen to. But I think that's a great idea. I mean, in every walk of life now, you've got audits, you've got health and safety, you've got standards, and you can't lift a box now at your work without getting shown how to do it. So I think it's a great thing for British Speedway, especially for the fans, and obviously the riders will be more confident in the tracks being so consistent in.
It's not new, that isn't. Not many years ago, Doc Bridget used to go around on orders from the STB, the BSPA, and he used to have to go around with Doc, checking the tracks, having a look at them, seeing where the problems were and anything. There was Doc Bridget, and there was another one, I can't remember who. Oh, it might have been Colin Meredith, Andy's dad.
It would have been, I think, yeah.
Yes, it was. And they used to go around the tracks, checking, making sure things were in order. So it isn't anything new what they, trying to bring out or need to bring out. Obviously, that's faded away over the years, hasn't it? But just one other point, going on about dirt on track, which is the one track what people complain about, too grippy, Kings Lynn. Yeah. If there's ever anything said about it too grippy, it's Kings Lynn, isn't it? So, I don't know, that's what that gets complained about, too much dirt on. That's from the riders, isn't it? Yeah, that's from the riders.
Too much dirt or too much clay content is something that I've heard mentioned as well. That it's not so easy to slide the bikes into the bends, I think, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So there you are, 360 Speeders. Hopefully, most of you possibly knew most of that there might be some detail there or something in the discussion we've just had that might be news to you. But Simon from Mildenhall, thanks once again for invoking that particular discussion. Hopefully that information in combination has allayed some of your fears that there is already an in-place process to try and monitor, to try and educate, to try and keep uplifting the standards of tracks around the UK. And if you've got any additional knowledge, anything that we didn't mention that you think that we ought to in this particular discussion topic, please don't hesitate to comment on our YouTube channel or on any social media. Right, welcome back. Some more of your messages submitted over the course of the last 7 days ago. Thanks very much again to those of you who have taken the trouble. If you have submitted a message and we haven't featured it, please don't be disheartened. Please just try again, and with every chance, week on week, that we will select your message. Thank you. Simon B from Devon has been in touch via email. Hello to you, Simon B. Enjoyed having Ben Barker on last week. I admire his optimism that we can still make a top 4 finish. We're coming up short, but Daniel Klima could make a change. Now, obviously, Simon B, you know what I'm about to say. Daniel Klima is now on the sidelines, now injured, a broken leg, I think, in a crash out in Poland over the weekend. I think it was over the weekend. I think possibly with a tangle with Ben Basso out in I can't remember where specifically, but out in Poland. And poor young Daniel, who was looking like he was going to make a difference to the Gladiators' push, has been sidelined. So that's a real shame. Not sure whether Daniel's likely or unlikely to make a track return before the end of the season. If he's not able to, hopefully he can link up with the Gladiators again in 2026. But of course, the big news midweek is that the Gladiators have signed 47 years young Scott Nichols. And I say 47 years young, my goodness, Scott looks as fit as a flea, fit as a fiddle, and he is going to make some difference, I think, for the Gladiators. That's quite a big injection of point scoring, home and away, that the Gladiators have now added to the top end of their team. So Ben Barker's due to get back on a bike, hopefully the next few days, certainly into next week. And with Barker, Nikolai Clint and Scott Nichols leading the charge, and you've got Joe Thompson and Lassie Fredrickson and the other guys, Alfie Botel, still in there fighting for the Gladiators. It could yet be a very interesting second half of the season. And who's to say that Ben Barker won't actually be proved right? Thanks, Simon. Good luck to the Gladiators. Ingrid D from Wilmslow has been in touch via WhatsApp. Well, thank you very much, Ingrid D. Tigers are quietly going about our business. Meetings in hand too. What a bonus that Leon is back riding. He was scoring well. We have the team to handle Ippo. Ingrid, you will be delighted because not only have you singled out Leon having made a racing comeback, but what a performance from Leon on Monday night. Top scorer, paid maximum, absolutely delighted for the young man. He was on here, of course, on 360 Speedway only 2 weeks ago, and you know, looking forward to, quietly confident about being able to make a track return before too much longer. And so it's proven. And to your point, Ingrid, you know, looking at the Premiership, the Sheffield boys are well placed. They do have a meeting or two in hand on some of the clubs in and around the top playoff spots at the moment. And on a 1-7 basis, you know, I'm not going to disagree with you. Sheffield might very well be the real challengers to Ipswich, you know, assuming that people do tend to agree that Ipswich are potentially the favourites to go the distance. So lots of very competitive, very dramatic, very tense speedway yet to come in the British Premiership. Thank you, Ingrid. Next up, Ricky J from Brunstone. I'm not certain where Brunstone is. Apologies, Ricky J. Surely Max Frick is the undisputed kingpin of the Premiership. Talk about leading from the front. He can even do it from 15 metres behind. Hashtag Fricktastic. I love it, Ricky J. So you've given me a big clue as to where Brunstone might be in the greater Leicester area, I would imagine. Max Frick, I've got to say, you know, using different metrics, league averages, and, you know, sort of more recent form over the past, you know, X number of meetings. I think the statistics will bear out your suggestion. Max Frick is currently the undisputed kingpin of the Premiership. He's certainly the in-form rider, banging in big scores home and away for the Leicester Lions. And you know, with that points potential at the top of the side, then anything's possible, right? Anything's possible. Yes, he needs the backup from the rest of the Leicester team, and you have got riders in there that are well capable, well experienced of scoring home and away. I wouldn't rule out the Lions from featuring in the playoffs at the end of the season. Hashtag Fricktastic. I will agree with you, Ricky J. Next up, Bob A writes via email from Reading. So Bob A says, thank you for featuring my previous email. You're welcome, Bob. Thanks for taking the trouble to submit one. Enjoyed last week's chat about riders who could gate. I'm just so glad that so many could never master it. 100%, Bob A, 100%. Can you imagine that Speedway was actually all about gating? and follow my leader. You know, that's the accusation a lot of people make, and yes, I'm not going to say that doesn't happen from time to time or to some extent, but thankfully, track prep, rider skill, all that good stuff, rider confidence does allow a lot of passing. And you know, there's not too many tracks, despite some of the rumours and reputations that you might hear that don't have regular passing on their circuits. So thank you, Bob, for getting back in touch. You've been second time lucky. And finally, for this week, for episode 14, Thomas L. messaged via WhatsApp. Thomas L. from Derbyshire. Hello, Thomas. And Thomas says, tremendously pleasing news that a club has been saved. What on earth can be done to introduce growth and strength, though? The golden goose is attracting people. So I believe that, Thomas, that will be a reference to the happy outcome for Workington Comets, who their suspension due to administration issues in the background has obviously been lifted, and as we've mentioned earlier in another message, that the Comets returned to track in tremendous fashion with that home success over defending championship champions, the Poole Pirates. To your point, though, Thomas, what can be done to introduce growth and strength? That's got to be one of the key considerations as the BSPL and all the promoters begin to kick the tyres on and consider what the structure, the format, the look and feel of British Speedway is going to be for 2026. I'm quite certain, you know, the AGM will be in November time, as it always is. I'm quite certain some of those conversations, some proposals have been tabled already and are already being discussed and considered, and I'm sure in short course some of that might leak out into the public domain. But you're right. You know, the whole final point that you make, Bob, and my final point this week in response is the golden goose, as you say, for Speedway is bums on seats. You know, if Speedway can be successful in attracting much bigger crowds than it currently does, or adding, you know, 20-30% to the average existing crowd levels, that actually takes away a lot of Speedway's ills. It takes away the financial uncertainty. It enhances capability to promote itself, for clubs to promote themselves, etc., etc. So I agree with your assertion that that is the absolute silver bullet for Speedway, is to attract many more supporters. Thank you, Thomas. Thanks for your profound thinking, and thank you again to everyone who's taken time and trouble to submit messages this week. Once again, if you haven't yet ever tried to do so, please do. And if you have, but your message hasn't yet featured on any episode, please don't be disheartened. Please keep trying. Thank you very much.